We'll go ahead and start. If Representative Williams, if you'll show me, what's your number?
I am 24.
24.
Thank you. If you would, let's bow in prayer. Our kind and gracious Lord in heaven, God, we acknowledge you as the creator of all things. We acknowledge you, Lord, as the grand overseer of the natural resources that you have entrusted us with. Lord, as we meet and deliberate and discuss this afternoon, we just ask that everything that is said and everything that is done in this room and among your people would be pleasing to thee and in furtherance of your kingdom. For us in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. We have a sign-up sheet. We have a sign-up sheet up here if anybody wishes to speak. And after we have our presentations, we'll go to our audience to hear what they have to say. And we're ready to begin. If our new land management director, Mr. Bentley, will come forward and introduce Mr. Cowan for us, we'll go ahead and get to this meeting this afternoon is being called because so many of our committee members had heard from constituents in their districts and areas about concerns with some proposed rules and regs. The rules and regs have not been promulgated or voted on yet, and the committee members here are going to get a little bit of a lesson today to begin to understand the issue. So if you'll go ahead and begin. Thank you. And give us a little introduction of yourself, because essentially this whole group is kind of new to our General Assembly members, and I know you come from the private sector, if you'll mention that as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am the chief of the Land Protection Branch, but I joined EPD just this past May. Most of my career was with Georgia Pacific in their Corporate Environmental Affairs Group, and I actually had been retired from there for a couple of years before I came back to work for Judd Turner. Some of you probably know Mark Smith, who retired in June, so that's the role I've taken on. So a lot of this is new to me, relatively new to me. I've certainly been immersed in this issue that we're going to talk about today since I've been here. But Jeff Cowan is our assistant branch chief, and he's been working on this rule for several years. So, and he's talked to many of you about it, as I have, but he's probably been talking to people about it for a number of years. So I thought it'd be best if he did the briefing for you today, and we'll just go with that. And
That's fine. We'll do questions afterwards.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. As Keith said, I'm Jeff Cowan with EPD. A little background, Keith just joined us. I've pretty much grown up with EPD. I was in the solid waste program for 22 years as an environmental engineer, as a unit manager over a couple of the programs within there. I managed the solid waste program under Mark Smith and Jennifer Kedduck before Mark, and became the assistant chief under Keith in August. And continued to try to work on these rules. This is one of two rules we're currently working on in the solid waste management rules. We're working on inert waste landfills, and we're also working on compost to improve our compost rules in the state to provide more infrastructure. We're glad to be here. This is y'all's meeting, so please, any questions, stop me. Going to go through a little bit on solid waste and then on inerts. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll just go through the process, and then the committee members will notify me on this board, and then they'll ask the questions that way.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, first off, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Act, our responsibilities. When we get y'all together, we like to talk about the Solid Waste Management Act. It gives EPD responsibility for the State Solid Waste Management Program. It establishes the Solid Waste Regulatory and Permitting Program, which, we're today that authority is given to the Board of Natural Resources to establish rules based on the Act. It establishes the Solid Waste Trust Fund, requires development and implementation of a state solid waste management plan with our other state partners, Department of Community Affairs, GFA, and P2AD, or sustainability. It addresses waste reduction, recycling, purchasing environmentally friendly products, and authorizes the cleanup of scrap tires. About 2 hours ago, Representative Nixon and I were talking about scrap tires, so we're talking a lot of solid waste issues today. Our goals within the EPD for the solid waste program is, first and foremost, we want to reduce the amount of solid waste disposed in Georgia. And then what we can't reduce, we want to ensure the safe management of that solid waste, and then finally clean up any problem sites that we may encounter during our work. Just a little bit on our universe for solid waste, and then like I said, I'm going to get into inert waste here in just a second. But we have 56 municipal solid waste landfills, 49 construction demolition landfills, 23 processing operations, some private industry landfills, almost 2,300 inert landfills that we've received notifications for that we've not got closed or still are operating. 1,088 collection operations, which a lot of them have been combined, and 169 transfer station operations. In fiscal year 2011, we disposed of 13.5 million tons in Georgia. As to compare to that, in fiscal year 2008, we disposed of almost 16.5 million. There's two schools of thought here. One school of thought, we're doing a really great job with waste reduction. The other school of thought is our economy has come way down in these last few years. So the economy has helped us with our waste going into the landfills, but we also have some waste reduction opportunities that are helping us also. Of that 13.5 million, 11.6 was went into municipal solid waste landfills. One of the constants has been waste imported into the state. It has continued to go up. It's 15% of our waste in our MSWs is from out of state, but overall tonnage has declined. We have disposed of, last year we disposed of 1.67 million tons in construction demolition landfills, whereas in fiscal year 2007 we had almost 4 million tons. Again, it shows the decline in building and stuff due to the economy. We currently have 34 years of municipal solid waste landfill capacity and 43 years of construction demolition capacity. The Act requires us to maintain at least 10 years, so we think we're doing a pretty good job with that. We are working currently on a project with a Environmental Protection Agency grant to map this infrastructure we have on a GIS mapping system. Our hope is instead of just having an Excel spreadsheet on our website, that folks can look at this GIS map and see where the landfills are, see where the transfer stations, see where the recycling facilities, see where end use for recycling materials is, and also they can help them to do business ventures in the state. And we're working to get that online and get that working where you just click on one of these bubbles and it'll tell you what facility and what they do there. What has happened in the last few years with solid waste management in Georgia, we have longer hauling distance, which means more air pollution and fuel consumption and litter. But we've also had a privatization of solid waste services in the state, which has helped us tremendously. That's why we have excess landfill capacity, but we have low tipping fees, and therefore we have out-of-state waste imports into the state. Every day we throw away 6.5 pounds of household garbage, where the national average is 3.1 pounds. So we want to continue with our work in trying to reduce this amount of waste going into our landfills. Also, we throw away almost a pound of C&D waste per person every day. And that's based on the fiscal year 11 data instead of the fiscal year 7 with 4 million tons. So we're much higher in 2007. We currently have 1,126 trailers every day on 10.2 miles long going on our roads. I think Mark's presentation last year was of the higher numbers. We at one point was giving the 1,400 trailers per day was traveling on our roads of solid waste going to landfills. Okay, now to talk about inert waste, which is a component of this. We have had initially inert waste landfills. Inert waste landfills are landfills that were designed to take waste that had low potential for harm to the environment. It was earth and earth-like products, concrete, cured asphalt, rocks, bricks, yard trimmings and land clearing debris, such as stumps, limbs, and leaves. These landfills are issued through a notification process known as a permit by rule. How this came about was many years ago in the late 80s, we began a process to update our rules, and we needed to manage this type of waste. We were having a lot of trouble with having enough capacity for our household garbage and our construction demolition waste. So we focused on those two things, and we did a permit by rule for this inert waste material, thinking, and there was very little to none at that time. Well, unbeknownst to us, we now have about 2,200 that we're not sure what the status is. We feel like there's only somewhere between 200 and 300 that are operating, and I'll sort of tell you more why we believe that. The permit by rule basically is a notification that's submitted to EPD. They fill it out. They do accompany it with a letter from a host local jurisdiction that the operation is in compliance with all applicable local ordinances, and they include a drawing that documents that no portion of the waste will be within 100 feet of a property line or an enclosed structure. On this last section here, this 100 feet of property boundary, we did a modification of these rules in 1997 to sort of head off. We had at that time we were having an issue where every home building lot was doing an inert landfill on that building lot, and so we had an explosion of these inert permit by rules. So we felt there was an issue with methane gas potentially and all, so we did a rule change in 97 and added the 100-foot buffer, and that slowed down the individual home building lots. As we told the home builders, we would prefer that they would set aside one lot in the subdivision and put their inert waste versus putting it on every home building lot. You know, like I said, we have got about, and I'll show here and later, about 1,200 of these that are still unaccounted for, which we believe there's thousands more than that. But how did EPD get to the point of we thought we need to change how inert landfills are permitted? Over the years, we've had a lot of potential for fires at these facilities. We've had some instances we got explosive hazards from methane gas, and you know, currently they're not monitoring for that. We've got a lot of uncontrolled dumping, failure to cover the waste, a lot of erosion of the soil and waste materials, and the permit by rule has resulted in a very large number that is just very difficult to regulate. Also, there's been some potential negative economic impacts from this. Here's sort of the universe right now as we see it. We have 1,036 that we sort of believe are somewhere either operating or inactive. Only 70 of those are submitting tonnage reports, which is currently a requirement. 70 out of 1,036. Of those 1,036, 789 are private, 246 public, and 1 private commercial. Like I said earlier, we have over 1,200 that are inactive subdivision inert waste landfill lots. We have tried to get with these building companies to get these closed out properly, and you know, noticed on the property deed with little success. Most of these companies have gone out of business because the housing market's gone. So of the almost over 2,500 total notifications that we received, we've only had documentation of closure of 270, about a little over 10%. So we're really working hard to try to get some of these things closed out. And right now, the closure is 2 foot of soil, grass, and notice it on the property deed. But here's the issue that sort of prompted us. Back in 2007, we had a fire at a closed inert landfill that started up, and Cobb County asked us to help close it. It was causing surface fires in the brush, getting very near subdivisions, and EPD went out and helped Cobb County try to put this fire out. It took us a couple of times. And as you can see by this aerial photo, this inert landfill was in the middle of a lot of subdivisions in Cobb County, and actually the property adjacent to the inert landfill was graded, as you'll see, to put in $500,000 homes. This was, like I said, in 2007. So the subdivision lots were right against where this fire was burning. We spent over $75,000 in 2 different trips out there trying to put this fire out. Even after the first time when we put it out, it came back, as you can see from this photo. As it burns underground, it creates voids, and it catches itself back up. And you see this big crack. This was after we'd done a lot of work and put a lot of dirt in there. Here's another instance where we had an unpermitted inert landfill that was done underneath townhomes in DeKalb County, and they had methane gas exceedances in their water meters at explosive levels. So we had to, the fire department was called in, the EPA emergency response contractor, the EPD's response contractor, and you know, we put in and looked at the monitoring the methane in these things. We put meters in these facilities. The company luckily And how we found out there was an unpermitted facility here was it was in the phase 2 findings of this property transfer. And what they did, they found this unpermitted inert waste landfill there. And so to make sure the buildings were stable, they augered big piles down and filled them with stone to build the foundation zone. That was a perfect conduit right from the waste unit right up into these buildings. So they are out there putting a gas extraction system in, and they're putting meters in these facilities to make sure they're safe. Here's a picture of one near my home where they keep dumping and dumping. They never cover, and just becomes an eyesore. This is this way every day when I go by. Here's a litter where the inert landfill was there, and the folks were used to it coming. They just kept coming and dumping. Here's a facility that they've not had proper erosion control method, so the waste is running off, the soil's running off. And here's sort of what a lot of these things look like. They just keep dumping and dumping, and then there's material like this metal thing here which is not allowed. You probably can see some 2x4s and all that it's not allowed in these facilities. So you get a lot of other types of waste that shouldn't be there. Here's an example of a flea market in Cobb County that was built on top of an old inert landfill. And what happened here was it caught on fire underground, and so they had to close. This is an economic impact. They had to close this facility. It was burning underground. There was when they began investigating was explosive gas concentrations. So this facility was closed for a long time until they could mitigate this fire burning underground at this inert landfill. Okay, so how our rule process, we wanted to improve the way these amendments, and improve our rules to ensure that we have these facilities operate in a manner that is protective of human health and environment. Our permitting process, currently the notification requires 11 performance standards under the notification permit by rule. What we proposed to do was to make design standards under a professional engineer, and then we included some things like methane gas monitoring, financial assurance for post-closure and closure, post-closure care, to try to make sure that these are properly designed and properly operated so we won't have some of these issues that we've got now currently. We did implement an 18-month transition period for these operations to look at whether or not they would like to move forward with the new standards or close under the current standards. So there's really, with the 6 months closure and getting a permit, there's a two-year window here to transition to this new program. Now I wanted to show you some of the problems here. And we've got these steep facilities, soil and waste material running off, so we added design criteria for erosion. We also, on this one here, we also added slope criteria, whereas before there's no slope criteria, so they would just dump until it met the angle of repose and just kept going, and you can't compact this material when it does that. Based on this poor operational stuff, you get sinkholes out there, and this is a lot of the reason the fires are caused, because you've got this organic material in the ground going through a heat, and you have a sinkhole, and it gets air, and it combusts, and you got an underground burning fire. But we've added operational criteria and compaction criteria to hopefully reduce the amount of sinkholes in these facilities. We got sites that require state funds to clean up when owners, unable to pay, so we were adding financial assurance. This is one of the facilities that burned, and I'll show you some more pictures in a minute. These things can be huge. This manager that used to work for me, he's 6'5", and he's just dwarfed by this pile of stuff. Risk of fires. Fires is our biggest issue. We've added operating standards to ensure soil cover. You got to have soil cover to break up these things, and design criteria for a fire protection stockpile in case it does catch on fire. We put soil on this thing and keep them. Response to incidents that occur, if they're properly managed, we have to go out and put out fires or work on methane gas issues. So we've added post-closure care to make sure in the future, once these things close, that they're monitoring, the owners are monitoring them. If there is any sinkholes, they'll fix them and not get the air into these facilities. Hopefully we'll have some future events that we won't have. A lot of these sites require emergency response from local, state, and federal organizations, so we're hoping to add criteria here for operating to reduce these, and this financial assurance will help us and require this closure and post-closure care monitoring. Emergency response. We've been out to a number of these facilities that were emergencies. This is one of the biggest ones we went to. When these things happen, we have the local fire departments there usually, the state forestry commission is there putting these fires out. Like I said earlier, we have our EPA emergency response contractor, our EPD's response contractor. And, you know, these are unplanned things we don't have budgeted for, or neither the local governments. So, and this one here was in Paulding County, which was a huge inert waste landfill fire, the one that the 6'5" gentleman was standing in front of. It was very difficult to get to. They had to lay pipe and pump water around to it with bulldozers pulling these pumps in there to get to this thing, because they were just had a big hill and they were just pushing this material off this big hill. Took a lot of heavy equipment, all that. You basically have to dig this fire, dig a buffer around this fire, water it, put soil in there just to put it out. And then, as you see, as they were digging in this facility, the stuff to the right here was dug out, which was not supposed to be in the inert waste landfill. Metal, which this has been a number of years ago, all this metal can be sold today in a lot of money, but when this fire was in 2004, they just put it in wherever they could find to dispose of it. But this is how it was burning when you dig down in there. I mean, it was a pretty hot fire burning in these things. And this shows the smoke. I mean, we've had people, complaining of asthma and all around these smoky fires. Sometimes these things burn for months and months. Here's part of the top of the pile. It's burned all the vegetation off. I'm not sure if we have one burning, an underground fire burning right now, but we do have a big mulch pile for Forsyth County, which is just an inert landfill on top of the ground because they got too much mulch in there. It's burning currently, and it's been burning for 3 weeks now. And they had so much mulch on that piece of property they can't break it apart. That's on top of the ground. So can you imagine having to dig underground and separate these things and try to get some water and dirt to these things? Okay, to talk a little bit about our rule process. And first thing that Chairman Smith asked us about, is right now we were scheduled to go to the board in October to have a board to vote on this final rule, but we have postponed that October time frame. One thing to meet with y'all and get your suggestions before we move forward with anything. So, but to go back and tell you a little bit, as Keith said, I've lived with this thing for a number of years, but we originally briefed the Environmental Committee of the DNR board on some proposed improvements to the solid waste rule in September of 2008. Basically, we asked them to go out for a stakeholders process to talk about inert waste landfills, composting rules, and some other things. From February to June 2009, we conducted 6 stakeholders meetings with stakeholders from all, from the waste industry, from the local governments, from waste companies, other state agencies. And finally we got to a point, and I know there's a big lag here, but as y'all are aware that we've had a budget crisis here, so we've changed our priorities as we've gone along. And also during this time, we've changed directors a couple of times too. So we finally got this teed back up again in April. We briefed the DNR board again. We went out to a public notice on the proposed rule. We had a public hearing. We received a significant number of comments from a lot of folks here in the room. We took those comments, we went back, and we've made some changes. So we rebriefed the board in August of this year, and we went out on a second public notice, and we held another public hearing in September. Here's a summary of some of the comments that we've received. We received more than this, but a lot of them are duplicate. We received a good many number of these things. But one of the main comments we've heard a lot of is the high cost of these new requirements. We need a methane monitoring gas exclusion. The 5-foot exclusion from groundwater in South Georgia is not possible. Lack of enforcement is the problem, not the PBR. Get the local governments to help with enforcement. That the new requirements will cause illegal dumping. The 100-foot buffer is adequate, and local governments do not have the time to allow for budget changes. Again, the cost of the application, and the operators need more training to avoid problems. We've looked at these things. We made a couple of changes. We did include a methane gas monitoring exclusion. If you have an inert landfill you're not going to put any organic waste into to cause the methane gas, we can issue an exclusion. And we did go back to the 100-foot buffer. We had proposed 200 foot initially. So we did go back to the 100-foot buffer. You know, some of the other issues, we do believe there's going to be cost to do this. We believe that cost may be warranted. I think if you do a business model on these things, that you would show the cost can be carried out over the life of these things. But we're still working on that to see. We think it can, you know, it's going to add on a small site anywhere for around $2 per cubic yard. To a big site, it could be 5 cents a cubic yard to do the permitting cost. What happens if the rule amendment is approved? You know, we will, you know, first send letters to everybody, which we've been sending letters on these public notices to all the people on our EnviroNet page and all the people that's come to our hearings, so they've been able to comment. The rule will give an 18-month period for the operators to decide if they want to move forward with the new rules or if they would rather close under the current rules, and then they have 6 months to implement that. And we will work with owners to obtain permits if they decide to remain open. There's a lot of things within this that there could be some improvements, and that's why we're here today to talk with y'all and look for your suggestions. But we've worked a long time on this, but we would like to still see anything that y'all suggest we can do better on this rule. And this is our contact information if you need Keith or I to answer any questions on it.
Thank you very much. That was a really good summary, and if we can have access to some more of your material, if any of our members here didn't get it, so I'd appreciate that too. And there are going to be some questions, so if you just want to hang around up there, the board's already lighting up.
Okay.
But I want to, if I can, summarize from what I've heard from some of our committee members and some other legislators as well, is I don't think anyone's questioning the severity of the issue. The ability for their constituents and themselves to understand the complexity of the problem is where our legislators are coming from. And one of the biggest concerns I've had has, of course, to do with the cost of doing business phase, and the number that was pointed out to me is from $15,000 to $50,000 to perhaps $400,000, depending upon the size of the land. And I think that's where your legislators are coming from, because if that happens, we've already done a red tape watch trying to help our small business owners not deal with a lot of red tape, and I don't think that anybody's in the business of wanting to put a good business out of business. And so that is one of our concerns. I don't think there are any questions raised about the seriousness of the issue, but needless to say, the fee increase issue is something that the legislative body deals with. We're the ones that deal with the appropriation and Ways and Means aspect of money. And that opens up that whole code section, and it opens up a huge battle. So I think the last time we did fee increases, and Chairman Smith down there, what year was that? It's just 2 years ago. He could tell you how long and onerous that task was. And so a lot of your legislators are saying, hey, this cost might come to the legislative body, so we need to know more about the issue. So that's what we're doing here, and we appreciate you slowing it down a little bit and giving us a chance to ask some questions. And the board is lighting it up, so I'm going to go ahead and start calling on members. And again, if we'll give the new members chance first, by new I mean the first question coming up, then we'll get back to you if you have repeat questions. And I'm going to call your number, and if you'll just introduce yourself. Number 14.
Tom McCall, sir, from Northeast Georgia. I have several questions, but I'll do like Madam Chairman says, and
You could
ask
do
them one at a
semicolons
time.
if you can get them all in. So
one of them was the exclusion on non-methane gas producing inert landfill. So you've taken care of that, right?
Yes, sir. If they propose to not take organic waste,
Right.
We can issue a variance to not require methane gas marking.
90% of what you showed us pictures of was fires. Do these new rules apply to landfills that don't necessarily take in any combustible material?
Well, it would apply to all of them that would be deemed inert waste. There are other ways of, like if you just wanted to deal with the concrete and the cured asphalt. I mean, we believe there's other ways of dealing with that. Sometimes that's a economic money issue, a budgeting issue too, but one of our local governments we've worked with, they have concrete basically was what they bury, and they mulch their land clearing and yard trimming stuff and do that through recovered materials. So we're wanting to work with them on how they could recover that concrete versus burying it. So, I mean, there's some ways to go around that versus just burying that. So, but it would apply, yes, sir.
Go ahead, Madam Chairman. I'll ask these
Thank you,
others
sir.
in a minute. Just don't forget about, I got a question
We'll
or
put a
two.
star by your name for a repeat. Number 17. Again, introduce yourself.
I'm Debbie Buckner, and I represent Talbot, Taylor, Meriwether, Harris, and Muskogee, and maybe something else. Huh? In any event, I'm looking at the slide where it talks about the different providers of landfill services, and you've got 49 private industry landfills. So I've got two quick questions. Those, I'm assuming you mean, are like the regional landfills, like in Taylor County, and not inert landfills, because the other number is 2,291 for inert landfills. Is that correct?
The landfill in Taylor County would be of the 56 that are on top municipal solid waste landfills. The
Okay.
49 private industry are the Georgia Power, Georgia Pacific landfills that are just landfills for that private industry.
So we don't know of any, do we know how many of the inert landfills that are considered to be private versus the ones that are municipal inert
There's,
landfills?
I think, 246 public inerts and 789. I think there's a slide in that we think are privately owned. We do not believe they're all operating. Some counties have like 8 or 9 of these inert landfills. Every department within the county has submitted a permit by rule notification. So, but under what we got right now, there's 246 publicly owned and I think 789 privately owned that we need to work on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 22.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Buddy Harden. I represent Pulaski, Crisp, Wilcox, and and part of Houston counties. My main, and I think you just answered part of this. You said 2,200 of these landfills, and then you mentioned in your opening that maybe one home being built, and that's a landfill. Are those permitted? Is that part of the 2,200? And the numbers you gave, are those the ones that you consider have to be permitted and corrected now? Because that was about half of the 2,200, I guess.
Of the 2,200, there's a little over 1,200 that were individual building home lots that had notified us that they were operating. They never gave us closure documentation. There is probably 10, if not 20 times, tenfold of that should have been permitted that never were. We find this out in the springtime when people decide to build a swimming pool, and their contractor comes and they start digging in their backyard, and all of a sudden they find an inert landfill that was not on their property deed when they bought their property. So the 1,200 comes out of that 2,200. So we believe that it's about 1,100 we're trying to figure out what is going on with them. We know about the 1,200. We just can't get the closure documentation.
Okay, so that about half of them you know about, and the others are
Yeah.
these one-home deals or
Right.
or
Yes, sir.
subdivision deals. Then let me ask one more question, if it's all right, Madam Chair. There will be a permitting process involving an engineering study, involving buffer zones, involving a lot of the new rules and regulations. What do you anticipate the cost of this type of permitting process to be to a city, county, or private industry?
Of the comments we received, Representative, for a 10-acre site, we have received comments from people in the realm of $15,000 to $25,000 for the permitting cost. As you get bigger, that gets much higher, but you have a lot more capacity to put in that inert landfill. As far as like the buffers, they're going to be the same as they were before, but $15,000 to $25,000 for a 10-acre site. Now, again, engineers are very subjective on their cost. But the methane gas monitoring, if you have to do methane gas monitoring, you can rent a methane gas monitoring. They can do their monitoring themselves. The meter rental is about $60 a day, and then you can do it within a day 4 times a year. So that would be around $200 or $300, and it's one simple form they submit to us. So, far as closure, the closure is the same as before, but we require financial assurance, and which is something that we believe can be problematic in this economy we have currently. But we have the options for local governments. They can do a local government test. And for private ones, they have the ability to do a funded trust where they would just tell us that, hey, we're going to operate this landfill for 20 years. So, our cost for closure and post-closure care is $500,000. You divide it by 20, and you pay that $25,000 each year into your funded trust. That is your trust that you get that money when you close the facility.
All right, and I noticed that you did say in some of your public comments that there was comment was to get local governments to help with enforcement. Is that a possibility to help reduce the cost of permitting, et cetera? Could local governments be basically your enforcement agencies? Is that what that rule means?
We would love to have local governments help, as what we have found is local governments have budgeting issues as well as we do. And we've reduced our number of inspectors, and so they have also. But we have had programs in the past with the Solid Waste Trust Fund having education enforcement grants where they have helped us, and that is a possibility again, yes, sir.
But the local government might indeed be able to police their own and do away with a lot of the maintenance cost involved with these landfills.
Some of the local governments already do have a program in place where they try to maintain these things. Some of the bigger, Gwinnett County and such, where they had a lot of these individual building lots, they put in places a long time ago. But what we have found here of late, since they've had budget cuts, they've asked us to step in and help them because they don't have as many people to work on these things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 24.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chuck Williams, Clark, Oconee, Morgan, and Oglethorpe County. You mentioned under the current rules as far as the closure process for inerts, 2 foot of soil, grass, and I believe you mentioned, if I heard you correct, something about notice.
Yes, sir.
Will you elaborate on the notice component of the current closure regulations?
When you operate an inert landfill and you close it out, it's required that you notice that on the property deed so that any person who purchases the property in the future will have knowledge that that inert landfill is on that property.
Thank you. Number 25.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Susan Holmes, Jasper Jones, Monroe, Butts. How often will these closed inert landfills have to be monitored?
For methane gas, it would be quarterly. They would go out and
Right.
do the punch test and see if there was methane gas. And, we believe that would be a good time, too, to look at their grass, make sure it needs to be mowed, or if there's any sinkholes, and they would need to be filled. So, quarterly would work in post-closure care.
I want to make sure that I understand. So once they're closed, for the cost that is incurred to close the landfill, then from that point forward, you said it would just be a matter of a couple of $100 a year?
The post-closure
monitoring?
the post-closure care would just be to monitor for methane gas,
Right.
which we do an audit program within the solid waste management program, and we rent meters. It's about $60 a day, so 4 days a year. They would need to walk the site, make sure that there was not any erosion, any gullies, any sinkholes. If they had sinkholes developed and such, they would need to put soil on there and re-put grass in there, because what happens with the sinkhole is the matter in the landfill, the organic matter is decomposing. It's probably under a heat, it's composting, and if it gets to a point where it catches fire and you got a sinkhole where it gets oxygen, we have an underground fire. So what we hope is post-closure care, they will see these voids and all and fix them, and so we wouldn't have this problem of fires in the future. But I don't know if it'd just be I think it would be $200 or $300 a year to do the methane monitoring if they'd done it themselves. But then if they had to do maintenance, they may have to mow the site and different things like that. The post-closure care in the proposed rule is for 30 years, but there is a 5-year possibility if you can show that it's not generating methane gas and the site is stable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 21.
Thank you, Carla Drenner, DeKalb County. Just to follow up on that question regarding post-closure requirements, is that the owner that would be qualified to do that, or would they have to bring in a engineer? Who exactly would have the qualifications to do the post-closure assessment?
The owner could do it under the proposed rules. One thing we do ask about the methane gas monitoring, we ask that we'd like for them to go to the landfill school that we put on in conjunction with Georgia chapter of SWANA. It's held twice a year at the UGA Continuing Education Center. We did not put that as a requirement in this rule, but as you saw, one of the comments was lack of education to the operators. So our recommendation is, we're not requiring it, but we would love to see them at that course. You'll spend 4 days in the beautiful classic city learning about landfills and rules, and you learn about methane gas monitoring.
Thank you. And I know that we have a return question from Representative McCall.
In the definition of an inert waste landfill, if I'm clearing stumps and I dump them in a ditch, am I creating an inert landfill?
By definition, yes, sir.
Then your 2200 ain't even in the ballpark.
No, sir, it's not.
I mean, nowhere close to being in the ballpark.
No, sir.
So are you saying that if I'm clearing land, dig a hole and push a barn in it or stumps or whatever, I got to go through this whole permit getting process?
Yes, sir. If you do a barn, you would actually need a construction demolition landfill permit.
Your 2200 ain't nowhere close.
No, sir, it's not.
So if I'm out here clearing land, dig a hole, push your stumps in it, or debris or whatever, not any kind of building debris, but tree debris or rocks that may be in the way, and I'm creating an inert landfill, I have got to get y'all to say it's okay for me to push it in the hole.
For the stumps and all, yes, sir, it would be. And, you know, there is a provision in the Solid Waste Management Act for an individual to dispose of waste from his own residence onto his own property, as long as he doesn't impact the environment. As far as stones, dirt, and such as that does not require a permit. But if you're filling a gully up with inert waste, the stumps, land clearing debris, and such, that would be an inert landfill. It would be better probably for an individual, not in the burn ban, but to potentially burn it or mulch the material versus just burying it.
Burn ban is a whole nother sore subject.
I'm just wanting to elaborate.
On the east side of Atlanta anyway.
One of my bosses that's over there too is behind me, so I want to make sure that I don't.
So let me ask you this hypothetical. If you ban burying any organic matter, would you have to change the rule and let them burn it, even inside the 54 county?
I mean, we looked at a potential for banning all organic matter to be buried, and the stakeholders group just did not want to go down that road.
Okay. I mean, I just asked.
But I mean, these rules are not. There's still a requirement for a permit when you bury organic matter.
What's the fine?
That's very subjective.
Your state representative is triple whatever. Just do it on a Saturday when ain't no EPD folks.
Number 17.
This is changing gears just a little bit, but it came up, and the tipping fees for Georgia for landfills of all types are lower than our neighbors. Do you know what the difference is for those fees right now? Like how far below our fees are to other states nearby?
We're pretty close. I'm actually working. Representative Smith gave me the Region 4 map a couple of weeks ago to update, and we're updating that. We've got the tipping fee information, but she also wanted the surcharges that each state was charging, so we're calling the states to get that. We will get y'all, I'll get it to Representative Smith, she get all that out to you for the Region 4 states. But it's in the $30 to $35 range. That is the posted gate rate. Mm-hmm. But if you take a lot of waste to these landfills, you're down for municipal landfills, you're down in the low 20s per ton.
Is there a difference for the different kinds of landfills as far as the fees?
Yes, ma'am.
Will that be included?
The MSW well, the inerts, we really don't know what they're charging right now. I mean, we've had people say, oh, I'll charge $5 for a truck, or I've got a posted rate of this, but we're going to have, we can get you the MSW and the construction demolition rate, and we're working to try to understand what the inert waste tipping rates is too, which it is much lower than the MSW and the C&D rates.
My thinking was if the rates were low and we were going to add to counties and cities' expense, they may have to go up on the tipping, on the fees that they charge for people to dump.
They will. We had one gentleman at one of the hearings that he charged $3.50 a ton, which is, I mean, so if you add $1 to ton of that, I mean, your ton, you can't put, you will do good to put a ton on a pickup truck.
Just check. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 22.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an individual question, but if you do not bury any organic matter, will you have to have a permit?
Well, if it depends on how you, if you're just getting rid of the concrete and the asphalt portion of it.
All right, let me explain the situation that I have existing in one of my communities. They actually do bury the concrete and asphalt, but the yard waste, any other organic matter, is stockpiled, and a mulcher comes by on a periodic basis to tear it off and really reuse, I guess, which is a good recycling thing. But they never bury any organic waste, so they would not be required to have a permit. Is that?
They would not have a permit for the recovery of the yard waste. You know, that is a recovered materials. That's exempt. And I know the community. I've talked to them at great length. What I want to do is work with them on ways to utilize that concrete instead of having this inert landfill that may cost them $15,000, $25,000, $150,000. That they could utilize that concrete. They could utilize it as a recovered material, just like they do the other. They would have to break it up into a size, but they may use it as riprap in ditches or something of that matter. But I do want to work with them to try to find a solution that would not be burying in this material.
Would that be a solution for other communities?
I'm going to work with all the communities that want to. I've also talked with another community, city, that they have some sort of the same instance with their yard trimmings. They recover it versus burying it.
But as far as the landfill is concerned, there would be no fire danger with just inert products, basically, the non-organic products.
If you got concrete and asphalt and earth, it would not be a fire problem, no, sir.
All right. Thank you.
I'm beginning to think we might need a quiz by the time we get through because we're all learning a lot today. So I thank you so much for your time. We still have a few more questions. Number 21.
Thank you. I want to follow back up on Chairman McCall's question about the penalties associated with noncompliance to this particular rule. Are there financial penalties?
In the Act, the penalties that I'm quoting here, I believe for a local government, it's $1,000. It's a potential of $1,000 per violation, with $500 per day as long as it continues. For a private operation, I think it's $25,000 with $500 a day as it continues on. I believe that's correct. That's the potential. That's the maximum penalty that's contained within the Act.
One follow-up question. With regard to, I'm going to change gears for a second. With regard to the fact that we dispose of, let's see, what did you say? More than twice the national average of waste. Does that figure include our out-of-state waste imports, or is that just strictly in Georgia?
We calculate that just in Georgia.
So is waste reduction part of this particular process that we're undertaking right now?
We do believe there are better ways to utilize this material versus burying it. So waste reduction, reusing the yard trimmings as mulch, reusing the concrete, the asphalt, we do believe that. We even have, the governor's office has put a waste reduction goal on EPD's strategic plan. We're working on that. So we continue to believe waste reduction, we need to work on that in Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 24.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you speak to, under both the current rules that we're operating under and the proposed rules, whether or not there is a specific explicit exemption for organic waste that is generated by production, agriculture, and by forestry operations?
I think those are already, they're excluded under the definition of solid waste in the rules. But normally, agricultural waste that's left on the crop fields is excluded. Silviculture waste that's left in the woods is excluded under those definitions.
Number 28.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Brooks Coleman from Gwinnett County. Talk a little bit about, on the first page, about the trust fund. Where does the money come from? What's it used for? And then I'll give my question.
You're referring to the solid waste trust fund?
Yeah, just to say, and is money from that, can it be used for the inert and all? Yeah.
The solid waste trust fund is funded on $1 per new tire. When you buy a new tire, $1 goes into that fund. It can be used for many things. It can be used for dealing with scrap tires, a scrap tire program within the state, cleaning up scrap tire piles. It can be used for emergency funds. It can be used for cleaning up abandoned landfills. It can be used for waste reduction activities within the state.
Right.
We have used monies in the past for emergencies at inert landfills where we had these fires and we had to have a way to put them out. And we've used it to close abandoned landfills in the state also.
But most of the money for that's coming from the tire, the $1 per tire, is that?
It's the $1 per tire fee and any fines that we collect on solid waste and scrap tire fines.
Okay. Is the fund fully funded? Let's put it, is there money in the fund at this time?
It's very, very, just got enough money for program operations and the cleanup of a few tires this
But we don't have it's still, after the year, it's still not there. The money's being used for other things. I don't want to put you on the spot. Is that right?
We were only appropriated, I think,
It's what you appropriate. That's all. That's my last question. It's what you, even though it's there, it's what you appropriate. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I notice you don't even have any water up there. We probably should. We're burning you dry with all our questions. This is going to end our question phase. I don't see any more questions from our members. There'll be some questions afterwards if y'all will stand around for us, and we're going to have public comment. Let's see. We'll do 5 minutes each when we go to public comment, but I want to point out to you at the conclusion of this, as you can see, this committee likes to delve into its subject matter, and we did an in-depth study last year over a 2-day period of some issues that come before our Natural Resources Committee, and solid waste issues really moved up to the top. We spent so many years studying water issues, and we know this is something we need to study even more. But it seems to be a general consensus of this committee that we slow down a little bit, or ask you politely to give us some time to get up to speed. It appears that if any cost is generated at with this process that involves the state funds, that requires an action of the legislative body. And so just want to make sure we're clear on that understanding, because you could pass rules and regs and they get passed, but then next year it becomes our problem because we've got to try and solve the cost factor that would be brought to us by constituents. So the problem gets complex. I don't think anyone in this room will tell you they don't want to deal with the problem. They just want to make sure it has been given enough debate so we can find the right solutions. But your slideshow, your program very much explained the problem to us, and really appreciate that. Thank you. We have 6 people. Our first person to come forward is Mr. Jackson, Gary Jackson, and about 5 minutes to speak, and just use the microphone over there. Did we bury his problem? All right, then our next person is Representative Kirby.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was first made aware of this back in April following their meeting from a a recycling center in the district I represent, and they were concerned about a lot of this. And one of the first things I found out was, this is literally a lot of, and just been added to what was originally in House Bill 274 in the 2011 session. And I have to say, I'm always disappointed when the General Assembly does their work and says this is not right for Georgia, for any agency to then try to put it in through rules and regs. It just doesn't sit well. And so I got very involved in this. And I think at the DNR meeting, Mr. Bentley did a great job in saying it about as well as anybody when he said, and I'm not going to quote him because I didn't write it down as a quote, but paraphrasing it, he said, we've got too many players that are acting like this is permit without rules. Is that close? And that's the problem. This is about compliance. Matter of fact, in their synopsis that they published on the 31st, in the purpose, they end up by saying, inadequate compliance with the number of permit by rule provisions has resulted in a large number of inert waste landfills that have caused groundwater contamination, methane gas generation, sediment pollution, and fires. In short, we've got a compliance problem and we've got an enforcement problem. We don't have a regulation problem. It's kind of like when you go out of the country to some place that they don't speak English. What do Americans do? We speak louder and slower, and by God, they're going to get it. If we just keep adding more rules, these people are going to get it. When I look at the 73 acres of 81 recycling, and that's what they are doing, reducing waste by recycling concrete, turning into rocks, recycling the asphalt, and making walk paths out of it. The compost piles that are going into mulch and different things. So they are actually reducing. But 73 acres, when I met with Director Turner and Jim, they told me that could be a $400,000 permit for them. And I do know their standard truckload, big dump truck, is $56. That math doesn't work. $400,000 to recover $56 at a time is not going to work very well. And I think Jeff did a good job again today of presenting a compliance issue. When you look at the current permit by rule, the buffer is required, the monthly cover is required, spreading and compaction is required, grading and drainage is required, access control is required, fire control is required, final cover of 2 feet is required, notice of final closure is required, deep notice is required, reporting tonnage is required, local approval is required, erosion and sediment control is required, wetlands permitting is required. All these things are already required. And when I had the opportunity to meet with Director Turner, one of the things I suggested is let's walk first. I don't have a problem, and I don't think in talking to the constituents in my district with the permit process that puts the onus on them. Don't go have to hire a bunch of PEs and everything. Tell us how you're going to comply. Make a permitting process, that will simply say, here's what we're going to do and the way we're going to do it. And make sure then they're following up on it. Get our compliance and get our enforcement where it needs to be. And as a body, then I also said I will do everything I can to help them go after the bad players. Those that aren't complying, we got to make sure they can't make a business decision of non-compliance, that it's cheaper to pay the fine than it is to go along with what they're supposed to be doing and doing it right. So we get to put some teeth behind that, have a permit process that makes sense and is not going to put these people out of business. The other thing is on methane gas monitoring. I don't think anybody, as he said, those costs are not bad. Quarterly methane gas monitoring, 100% LEL at the boundaries is fine. I still don't understand how we arbitrarily pick 25% of the LEL inside any buildings, other than that's what we've always done in the past, so we'll just continue to do it. But still, methane gas monitoring could be part of this added to it without, again, an additional hardship. But when we start putting inert landfills out of business, all we're going to do is generate more garbage dumps or traditional landfills, because when these inerts can't pay $400,000 for this permitting process, then that waste is going to a regular landfill. They're going to fill up quicker, going to cause the generation of more landfills with regular garbage, the odor, and everything that goes along with it. And we all know what happens when somebody wants to put a line facility in our district. That's not going to go over very well. So I would certainly agree with Chairwoman Smith. We need to slow this process down. Let's work together. Let's look at a permitting process that makes sense, puts the onus on the operators to tell them how they're going to do it, and then enforce it. And if we need to add the methane gas to what we're already doing, I think it would be fine. Just for a little background, I've spent the last 16 years doing environmental health safety compliance, dealing with all the EPA and EPD regulations for major manufacturing corporations. And this is, something that we consistently see. We have an enforcement problem, we jump over and we just throw this kitchen sink at them and cause a lot of extra costs that in the long run doesn't really solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Larry Carvin. If you'll identify yourself and just come to the podium and speak, about 5 minutes.
My name is Larry Carver. I'm the owner of Catawba Inert Landfill, north of Columbus, Georgia. Madam Chairman, I appreciate this opportunity to speak, and to the members. Pretty much what was just said covers basically what I was talking about, but the problem being is in the EPA reports, you only show 100 inert landfills that's actually in compliance. And so you're talking about a big problem, and then you only got 100 inert landfills that's actually in compliance with what's going on, so the rest of them are illegal in my opinion. And if you put us out of business, the problem's going to increase, because most of these people can't afford to pay these prices, and they're going to be dumping illegally. It goes on every day. You're not going to solve the problem by putting these other small independent landfill owners out of business and losing our investment. Mr. Cowell, in the last 40 years, how many fires do you estimate the state of Georgia?
If you'll direct it to the chair,
Oh,
and we can delve into that later. If you'll just make your comments.
Okay. I'd just like to know exactly how many fires they had from in there. And one of the problems he was talking about, Mr. Cowan, was one of these methane gas problems was an illegal landfill. It wasn't permitted. So you're actually putting the burden on the ones that's trying to be illegal. You know, I've spent over $350,000, 6.5 years of my time, and if you keep adding these burdens on us, we're going to have to be forced to close. And we are providing low-cost a business to these people, and an opportunity for them to dump where they can afford it and not dumping illegally. That's about all I have to say.
Thank you very much,
Thank you. I
sir.
appreciate
Appreciate it. I see Senator Ginn is here. Senator, just saw your name. Come on up, please. Do we have to give the Senate 10
Madam
minutes,
Chair.
or can you do it in 5? No.
I can do it less than
The
that.
upper body.
You know, one of the things, and I appreciate you letting me come before you today.
Thank you, sir.
It's a great honor to see my old classmate, Jeff Cowan, said one of the scenarios that, and I agree with my esteemed House member that we've got a lot of regulations, and, you know, the enforcement side of it, I think every one of the examples that Jeff shows is a bad example, has a lot of permit violations already out there. One of the things is, you know, y'all all work for everybody in the state, and this will tremendously increase the cost of operation of inert disposal. One of the things that I want to reiterate what Representative McCall brought up, if you eliminate the burying of organic material, you've solved 95, maybe more % of the problem. And one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting when I'm looking at the math and knowing what I know about local government and state government and what's going on, I'd want to know how many inert landfills the state of Georgia has permitted. And I'm not going to tip the cards over, but, you know, in DOT, we push a lot of concrete and asphalt and stuff underground. And I don't want to belabor that point, but I guarantee you, Jeff probably would tell me that we don't have any of those permitted in the state. So when we start looking, we're in violation of some of our own rules and regs, and that's not good. But at the same token, I think that there are some ways to fix this by simply eliminating the organic material that we bury. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Watkins?
Madam Chairman, I'm Leon Watkins, and I have an inert landfill. We have an inert landfill.
Move the mic just a little bit. Just move it. There you go. Thank you.
We have an inert landfill in Pickens County behind Zell Miller Overlook. And my inert landfill represents Pickens, Gilmer, and Fannin. And they don't have, that's where all the material from the yards come into our inert landfill. Been there 8 years. 8 years ago, we charged a pickup to bring the brush in there, $10. A single axle, they pay $30, and a tandem, they pay $50. And if we have to upgrade, it's going to cost more. And I'd like to say, we've got $300,000 invested in 38 acres, and I hate to close it because it provides a good service to 3 counties that don't have an inert landfill for the citizens to take their stuff to. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have one other person who's signed up, Jerry Murkison. If you'll come forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
members
sir.
of the committee. I'm Jerry Murkison, City Manager for the City of Hawkinsville. I'm not quite or nearly as elaborate as my good friend, the Senator or the Representative, but I'll try to make our case for the City of Hawkinsville. We're a small community of 4,500 or less in our community. We have a 1-acre inert landfill that we've been operating for a long time. We are the community that Representative Hardin alluded to. We compile our yard waste, and twice a year we have a contractor come in and we pay that contractor to grind it and haul it away. We have a hole in the ground where we put our concrete and our asphalt, approximately 2 or 3 tons per quarter, as we report to Mr. Cowan, is what we put in that hole. And these rules and regulations would severely hurt our community. I had an estimate done by a consulting engineer. He told me that the cost for upgrading our inert waste landfill would be $150,000 initially, and the methane monitoring or all the other monitoring would cost our community about $12,000 a year. That's from an engineering firm that did that cost. Now, I consider personally and publicly EPD a partner in the services that we provide for our constituents in our community. And I really appreciate what EPD does for the state and for my community. I do appreciate the modifications they made to the original rules regarding the 100-foot buffer and the waiver on methane monitoring. But if we move forward with this rule change, this will cost my constituents and my community a considerable amount of money, and therefore I disagree with the rule change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Gary Jackson. Is Gary Jackson here? All right, well, that concludes the public testimony part of our meeting, and I have one committee member who's on overtime, and you don't get any more money for being overtime. Representative McCall, Chairman McCall.
Madam Chairman, can I ask EPD a question?
Yes.
I'm going to have to
Mr. Cowan, if you'll just come up to the...
take a whole lot of Rolaids because of the heartburn I got. You were talking about the fines on municipal landfills were $1,000 or something, $500 a day, yet you said the private landfills were $25,000. Is that what you said?
I believe that's what the Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Act contains in it. Yes, sir. I can confirm that.
And no, that's all right. I thought that's what I heard. And a private landfill goes every way from the guys from Pickens County and Columbus to me filling up a ditch with a stump. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So you gonna come out there and find a guy clearing land $25,000 for pushing a stump in a ditch?
That is just the top. That's the top potential fine.
Potential, and I understand how budgets are running, and I understand EPD ain't got enough money to even keep up with the millions more than the 2,200 you got here. I understand all that. But my God, what are y'all thinking? $25,000 for a private operator who these guys are doing services to the community, and me pushing a stump in a ditch, which is probably stopping the erosion in the ditch anyhow. Good Lord.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Representative McCall, Chairman McCall, I think I know where he's going next. Quickly. To our guest speakers today, you can tell by the questions we're asking in our attempt to understand a little bit more what's going on and our need to respond to the questions raised by our constituents that this committee probably would like to make an informal request that we slow it down a little bit and give us a chance to have some input, give you some of our suggestions, and I don't think anyone wants to ignore this problem. You've done a very good job of defining it. We will offer here to help you research and come up with some suggestions we might have here. And informally from the House side, I'm going to appoint some House members who asked our questions today, and I'm going to ask Mr. Hardin to chair it, if he would, for me. But Representative McCall, Representative Buckner, Buddy Hardin to chair it, Representative Williams, Representative Susan Holmes, she had to leave, and Representative Carla Drenner. They represent the broad spectrum of questions that were asked today, and any other committee member, and actually any House member, elected member, your input is welcome. I'm not sure that we have the answers, but I know as representatives, I think we definitely feel the responsibility to respond to some of these questions. Again, not lessening at all the seriousness of the issue you brought to our attention. And with that, we adjourn. Thank you.